My name is Garina Isasi. I am the chair of workshops for the Gaithersburg Committee for the Book Festival. I'm also an author, and I'm happy to introduce everybody here. There are a couple of announcements, which you may have already heard in the last session, which is please silence all of your devices for the latest updates, and make sure to follow GBF on Facebook, Instagram. I believe we're also on Blue Sky and a couple of other places on social media. Also, we have surveys, and if you can fill out a survey at the end, either on our website, and there's a QR code on some of the signs around here, please do so and let us know what's good, what's bad, what we need to improve on. Also, if you submit a survey, you'll be entered to the drawing for a Visa gift card, so go for it. So Sarah and Alex will be signing books immediately after the presentation, and copies of their books are on sale in the Politics and Prose store in the Activity Center. So, now, let me introduce our authors for this session. Alex Finlay is the best-selling author of acclaimed novels, including the 2024 national bestseller, If Something Happens to Me. His work regularly appears on the Best of Year list and has been translated into 25 languages and sold around the world. Nearly all of Alex's books have been optioned or are in development for film and television, and he just told me that really impresses his children.
That's all I get. That's all it gets.
His novel, Parents' Weekend, was just released less than 2 weeks ago, and according to his Facebook page, he's a vodka drinker and a bad guitarist.
Terrible guitarist.
So I won't be asking him to join my band.
Wise choice.
Sarah Pekkanen is the #1 New York Times bestseller author of 15, count them, 15, solo and co-authored novels. Her books are sold in 36 countries with several optioned for TV and film. Her latest book, House of Glass, she serves on the board of the directors of International Thriller Writers and is the founder of a nonprofit, IndiaStreetPaws.com, which rescues injured and abused street dogs in India. She lives just outside of Washington, D.C., and I do have to tell you something about Sarah. She is considered the patron saint of the Gaithersburg Book Festival because she was one of the very first supporters as an author. She was one of the very first people who appeared here and keeps coming back every time she has a book that comes out, even sometimes when she doesn't. So, and Judd calls her his muse. Judd is our founder, so that's really nice. And on a more personal note, she really encouraged me as a writer, and my first book came out, basically, I wrote it because she was very encouraging to me at the time. So, Alex and Sarah's conversation is going to be moderated by Colleen Shogan. Colleen is an author who holds a PhD in American politics from Yale University, and she served as the Archivist of the United States from May 2023 until her dismissal just a couple of months ago. She was the first woman confirmed as the nation's archivist, and prior to that, she was the director of the David Rubenstein Center for White House History at the White House Historical Association. Now, in researching her, I saw that the titles of her novels, she has written several novels, are very interesting in light of current events. The first two are called Stabbing in the Senate, Homicide in the House, and her most recent one was called Lethal Legacies. So now, keeping on the note of people getting killed and dying, I'll hand it over to Colleen.
Yes, thank you. Oh my God, thank you. Great. Well, it's terrific to be here today. I'm so happy to be at the Gaithersburg Book Festival again, and a gorgeous day. And we're going to be talking to two authors that have written amazing books. I read these books very quickly, and that's what you want for a thriller, right? You know, if you cannot put it down, if it's a page turner, you know these are two excellent books. So we're going to talk, although they're very different books, there's a lot of common themes in these books. So I understood immediately after reading them why they were paired together. So we're going to talk about some of those common themes here today. So the first one is the setting of both of your novels. And both of the settings, one is at a parents' weekend at a elite college, Another is in a beautiful home, in a very wealthy community. These are idyllic settings. These are very peaceful, idyllic settings where you would think that there would be a lot of safety, right? But there's not. There's some very bad things that happen in these settings. So can you talk to us about why you chose these settings and why that's so important to your novels?
Absolutely, but first, I just saw the founder of the book festival,
Oh, there's
and our
Judd.
mayor, Judd, in the golf cart. Judd, you did it. I met Judd before the first ever Gaithersburg Book Festival, and he was like, I want to build a book festival in Gaithersburg. I want it to be the biggest festival in the country. And I'm like, okay, I'm in. And he did. I mean, this is the most incredible book festival. The people, the volunteers are really the heart of it, who spend so much time. The people are great. They've got things for writers, things for families, things for kids, and I love coming here. The only thing that'll keep me away is a kid graduation, and I've told them no more graduating. I can't miss the book festival. So thank you, Judd, for having us.
I want to agree with all of that, but I'm not as big a suck up as Sarah, so I'm just going to keep it,
We have a brother-sister kind of relationship. We have been paired up for so many events, and actually we meet up for writing sessions together. And so we go to World of Beer, and we sit there and we try to write. We usually end up talking or teasing each other. But AF and I, we did an event together Monday night. We've done so many together, and God, I wish I could think of something to say to suck up to you, but I didn't.
Yeah. No, it's the only person she doesn't suck up to. It's really weird.
I'm sorry, we had a question.
Oh, something about the setting.
The setting, okay. Oh,
You
great.
took notes.
I did take a couple
like
notes, just because these were really smart questions, and I only had one cup of coffee.
Well, I had a lot of time to write them. You kind of laugh, folks. I mean,
Okay, so the setting. So for me, I really like the idea of kind of a locked room setting, like the old Agatha Christie novels, where you've only gotten a certain number of people in the room, you know somebody did it, but you don't know who did it. So House of Glass, I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but it is set in our area. There's a big old house in Potomac, so there are lots of little Easter eggs in the book for local people. And it was really inspired by a conversation I had with a fellow mom. We were on a school bus going to some field trip, and they said, what do you do, when you're not doing this? And she said, oh, I'm a BIA. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And she said, like a GAL. And again, I had no idea. And then she said, I'm an attorney, and I represent children in high conflict divorce cases when there can be no resolution reached. And I immediately was like, that's my next book. So, of course, because we're thriller writers, we got to make things messy. Again, I'm not giving anything away. This all happens before the first chapter or in the early pages. I was imagining a really beautiful, isolated mansion in Potomac. Very wealthy family lives there. She's from old money. And there's the mother, the father, the grandmother, and the little girl, and a nanny. And the nanny dies, the young, beautiful nanny dies, and it turns out the father was having an affair with her. So both father and mom could have motive, right? Grandma too. But the police investigation is stalled, the parents are divorcing, and the BIA has to figure out who this child should spend their time with and how, but she's realizing I could be sending her to live with a murderer. Then the little girl, who's brilliant, precocious, and has not spoken a word since her nanny died, starts doing very strange things, creepy things. And suddenly the BIA thinks, maybe I'm going to be sending the parent to live with a murderer. Bum, bum, bum.
I should have taken notes. That was really good. So Parents Weekend, the setting is as mentioned, a small private college in Northern California. It's Parents' Weekend is kind of a tradition. For those of you who've been to them, where you send your kids off to school, and a few months off to college, and a few months in, the families all get together, and it's like a celebration. And first time you're seeing your child after they've been off on their own. And so in the story, the dorms have kind of made small group dinners. So there's like 5 kids from the dorm and their families are supposed to go to a dinner on the first night of Parents' Weekend. And the parents all go and they're having a great time, having cocktails, getting to know each other, and the kids never show up. And at first they think, well, they're just being college kids. They got sidelined by a party or, just being irresponsible. But then as the hours go by and then a night, overnight happens, with not so much as a text from the kids, that panic ensues because there's just 5 missing students. And the book takes place over that weekend, and we learn about the secrets of the parents, and maybe that has something to do with the missing kids, or is it a threat from the friend group from within? Okay. And the setting, why I picked it, I'm super lazy. I was at Parents' Weekend at my kids' college, and it's a private school in Northern California, and I had the idea.
That's great. Did you get to write off that trip?
Well, we'll never know. I guess maybe part of it.
And you were hinting at the next question in both of your answers, but another common theme is families. So families play a big role in both of your books, and a lot of relationships, parent-child, spouses, siblings, grandparents. So can you talk a little bit about how you write about familial trust, and what role does that play in writing thrillers, in particular these books?
My kids say I've betrayed their trust because I've stolen so much of their lives from my books. For Parents' Weekend, I think my son was going to get an injunction against me before it went out if I didn't take certain things out. I think, for thrillers, there's always the question of stakes, and some people write great books about, a big terrorism plot or different kind of threats. And for me, I like to write about, a threat closer to home for all of us, which is our families, or the families we're born into, or the families we all make, whether through friend groups. And so I forgot what the exact question was, but I enjoy making that the heart of all my books. There is families in one form or the other.
I think family relationships are so complicated, right? There is nobody who can get under our skins like family, but we kill for them, like if their lives were at stake. So I love digging deep into those relationships. And, a lot of things that get attention are like say there's a serial killer, right? We're going to learn everything about the serial killer. Unfortunately, we're going to learn very little about his or her victim in comparison. But I'd be more curious about the spouse of the serial killer. What was their day-to-day life like? That might be a book. Maybe I should stop talking because but yeah, those deep family bonds, there's nothing like them. The richness, the complexity.
Now, another component, and Alex actually talked about it a little bit, there's a ton of secrets in these books. And there's so many secrets in a way. As someone who has written, not thrillers, but mysteries, I was really surprised about how you kept track of all the secrets. So that's really what my question is you have layers and layers and layers of secrets with different relationships in both of the books. So did you just start out with all of the secrets, as a list of secrets, and then keeping track about when you revealed the secrets and who knows what about which person? It becomes very intricate and complicated as the story evolves, and of course that leads to the resolution.
For sure, it's almost mathematical in a way, and I have big whiteboards. Remember Carrie from Homeland, who was scribbling, and I have scribbles all over, and I generally know the big thing that happened and who did it when I start to write, because I need to be able to foreshadow and, put certain things in. But how I get there is a surprise, and there are those layers. Whatever happened needs to be a big enough thing that it's going to have legs for 400 pages. You can't just have, somebody cheated on an exam in college. It's got to reverberate into the present. One of the complexities with House of Glass is that I wrote it all from the point of view of one character, which I don't typically do. I typically like 2 or 3 or 4 characters. And so that character, you know, I was able to see inside of her head, but I wasn't able to see inside of anybody else's head. So that made what they were hiding a little trickier in certain ways.
Yeah, I'm not as regimented as Sarah has the crazy board, I call it, at her house. But I just, you know, I write and
He writes on his phone.
Yeah, no.
Tell the story.
No, we're not.
Tell it,
Please
come
don't.
on.
I write, she loves to make me sound like a hack because I am, but I write on my phone. I write my first draft of the novel on my phone while I'm walking. So that's weird, I know, it's strange. But for me, it's, you know, I started writing when I had young children, I was practicing law, and I was super busy, and I did it on the subway too. It was the only time I had to write was on the way to work and the way home. And so back then it was on a BlackBerry, if you can believe that. And so I just got in this habit, and that's how I do it. My wife keeps thinking I'm going to get hit by a car, and we have all these discussions, but it works for me. I mean, I dump it all in a Word document, and at the end of a week, and I have a lot of pages, and many of them are good, but it takes away the intimidation factor of having the blank page, and so that's basically how I've done it. But keeping track of stuff, I struggle. I write multi-perspective characters. In Parents Weekend, I have 5 families, and they each have, you know, three or four members. That's a lot of characters to keep track of. I think my law practice of years of having to kind of take mountains of material and organize it have helped in that regard. But I also have a good friend, Sarah. I've struggled with Parents Weekend. Sarah, I think, thought I was going to have a heart attack, so she sat down with me.
I truly did.
And sat with me for 2 full days, going chapter by chapter. And
He bought the beer, his world of beer, so it worked out well for me.
Yeah, but I mean, that's reflective of, we kid each other, but I mean, a more giving friend and writer you will not meet. That's the only nice thing I'm going to say today. Just
Yeah, who are you? We don't talk like that.
No, in both of these books, the other commonality that I recognize right away is that the protagonists who are trying to figure out what's going on are both women. And I'm not an expert in the thriller genre, but I know that that's a little unusual with the thriller genre. So talk about why you chose female characters as your protagonists, and why that's important, you think, in maybe the subgenre of thriller writing.
let me mansplain that to you, Sarah. Why you're right, women. I'll let you start.
That was good. I've never written from the point of view of a man. I've always written, not to say I never will, I think I will someday, but I think like Gone Girl really flipped the script a bit in terms of writing as a very complex, diabolical female. I'm not sure she was a protagonist. I don't know if anybody was in that. But yeah, I think I like to write really flawed, complicated, strong women because that's reality, right? Everybody's flawed, complicated. Women are strong, so they're kind of natural born, heroes for me.
Yeah, in Parents Weekend, I have an FBI agent. She's been in other books.
Her name's Sarah.
Sarah. Coincidence. But basically, I had these 5 families, and they all are terribly flawed and have all these secrets. And I needed an investigator, and this character, Sarah Keller, from my other night shift and Every Last Year, she's like super decent, super competent, super no nonsense. So I thought she would be a nice contrast to these real mess of relationships and families. And I write her and her husband. They come to me really easily, so it was just a matter of she fit this book. And the thing I think the people who like my books often mention that character, and I think it's because in a lot of thrillers, the main characters are like in Gone Girl, there's a lot of just flawed people doing terrible things, and I just like this idea that there's this couple who have a great relationship. They are really, just decent people, and I think it just adds a contrast to the rest of the characters in the book.
It's very prolific, both of you. So maybe you can talk a little bit about. I know when I was writing my books in sequence, it was always a challenge because I was promoting one book that was out. I was writing another book that was in production, and then sometimes, depending on where you are with a contract, you were actually thinking about the next book if your agent had to go out to sell the next 2 or 3 to your publisher. So can you talk a little bit about how you keep, at times, maybe as many as 3 stories juggling at once?
Yeah. Do you want to go? Yeah. Okay. So that's why I have notes, because when we were driving here today, I was realizing that I have a book coming out in August, right? I'm finishing up the next book. And for a minute I was like, wait, what is House of Glass about? What are the names of it? Like, I always say it's like when I call the kids by the dog's name or vice versa, when you just have too much going on. So it is complicated. It's almost like when you're in the writing world, you're truly in a different world. Like you just kind of zone out, you're in this space, and then when you step away from it, you're in a bit of an altered state, right? So you have to get back into that mindset, and then it all comes back. But I do, if it's been a few books, I do struggle for a minute to remember the characters, all those details. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been at signings where I've talked about a character in the book I'm promoting, and then somebody in the audience says, "Do you mean Jenna? Not the character from your last book you're talking about now?" So it gets confusing, and I tend, before I go on tour, I listen to the audiobook, because by the time my book comes out, and it's the stores, I've written a whole other book, like Sarah, and it does get confusing. It's amazing how much you forget of your own work, and so I'll listen to the audio. It's a fun thing to hear some other person perform it, and gets my head into it.
That's a good idea. Now, what would you say if you said you wanted readers to take away 1 or 2 things from these books? What would you say? What is the insight? What would you want them after reading it to take away?
I want to hear your answer. I feel like you're going to say something funny.
I'm not a writer who thinks I'm going to make you rethink the universe. I write thrillers, and I view my job as a thriller writer is, if you have a long airplane ride, maybe I'll make it a little shorter. If you're at the beach, I'll let you have a little nice day. Or if you're getting up and before the kids wake up and you've got a half hour and you want to escape, then that's my goal. I view it as like, we're entertainers. Like, I want to entertain, and there's plenty of people who can change the way we think about this or that can do it much better than I do. So I'm all in it for the reader to just escape for a little time. Wow.
That's the word that came to my mind too, escape. Like, we want you to have fun. We want you to, maybe come away thinking about our characters, thinking about the plot, but there's so much vying for your attention right now. I mean, the screens and the emails and the pings at all hours of day and night. So we are so happy that people still want to, read books and read ours. It's really wonderful. So, our job is to entertain you, give you a little mini vacation between the pages, and that's what we try to do.
How did you learn to write like that? I mean, that's different than, for example, what I write, mysteries, don't end, chapters, not necessarily short chapters, and they don't necessarily end on a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter. So how did you learn to do that? That's a particular talent.
Probably by reading lots of those books, and loving them. I think you need to write what you love to write, and I was always drawn to thrillers. I started out writing more contemporary fiction. In fact, my first few talks here were about books more along the lines of like Taylor Jenkins Reid, Jen Weiner. I had the same editor as both of them, and I wrote in that genre. And then I started there was a little suspense in one book, and then towards the 7th there was a murder in one, and so I was drifting into the psychological thriller territory, and I think I'll stay here for a long time.
Fascinating.
She had a really good answer, and I don't have one. I think it's just you learn by doing, by reading, and I think there's this people who are working towards getting published. I think there's lots of resources now there never were when we started out. And at the International Thriller Writers, where Sarah's on the board, they have classes. There's just a lot of things you can do. There are, a lot of writers like there are no rules. There are kind of some rules that you can use to make a book sellable and enjoyable, and so there's a lot of. I wish those things would have been around, because I learned a lot more by doing than taking classes. But now I go to the classes. I learn something every time I do from other writers.
Yeah, I mean, and there are some craft workshops here that are Where's Gary? Yeah, she put together, there she is, yeah, she put together some craft workshops. There's one on memoir later in the day. Politics and Prose, our indie bookstore, our hometown store, is, they do workshops online and in person. I'm actually teaching one this fall called How to Write a Killer Thriller, I think is the title. ITW is, Alex was on the board and I'm on the board now, and basically we have something called Thriller Fest in New York every year, where it's just workshops and agents and, you're bumping into authors. Karen Slaughter, I just, bumped into her in the hallway. It's the coolest thing. And we do classes online too. I'm sure you've taught in a million of them. So yeah, there are many places out there that will give you, that will give you help.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you have many books under your belt, but how did you first get published? What's that story?
Yeah, no, it was a long journey for me. I was, practicing law, and I wrote 3 legal thrillers that were published under my own name. Alex Finlay's a pen name, and the funny thing about it was I didn't really find any readership until I stopped writing what I knew. You get this idea, right? I wrote about the DC kind of insular legal community, and I'm proud of those books. They were well reviewed. Not very many people bought them, but it wasn't until I started doing something else, writing just non-legal based thrillers, that my career turned around.
So I also had a kind of a tough path to publishing, which is the norm. I spent 3. This thing's getting a little fresh. I spent 3 years writing a book, and I was, all excited about it. I workshopped it at the Writers Center, which is here too. Did all the things. I got an agent, and at the time I was writing a column for Bethesda magazine, kind of a humor column on mothering. I wrote a story for Bethesda magazine about the fact that I'd written a book and gotten an agent, and they were about to go out with my book. So this was in a magazine. Every publisher in New York turned down my book. Every single one. So I would go to the grocery store and just have on dark glasses, be avoiding everybody I knew. Everybody's like, when's your book coming out? I'm like, oh, never. So then I wrote another book. That took 2 years. That one got published. I didn't start to see, I didn't start coming out in hardback until book number 8. So it just, it's a long career, and you have to love it to do it. And you don't always love it, sometimes you hate it, but if it's harder to not write than it is to write, you have to keep on doing it.
Yeah, I wrote, if you meet most writers, they have the book that's in the drawer on the hard drive that didn't sell or didn't go anywhere. But when I have one of those, and when I sold my first book, it was a 2-book deal, and at the time, the first book, I got an agent, and I thought it was the great American novel, this book that nobody wanted. And so when I got the 2-book deal, I'm like, oh, well, this is going to be easy. I'm just going to dust off the masterpiece. And then I read it, and I was like, I can't believe I got an agent. This is awful. So it's all perspective, and you learn as you go.
And can you tell us what you're working on now?
I should actually probably talk about my next book, which will be out in August. So that one's done. It's called The Locked Ward. And I used to be a journalist. Most recently, before I started writing novels, I wrote for the Baltimore Sun, doing some investigations, features. And I was trying to think about setting for the next book. And I thought, what's the setting I haven't really seen done, frequently or authentically? And I thought, what about the places like where Hinckley was held? What about a locked ward for a highly violent offender? Maybe they're being held there while they're waiting to see if they're being judged, not guilty by reason of insanity. So then I knew I had to get in one, because it's really the details. So it took a while. I reached out to everybody I knew. I was hunting people down on Instagram, and I found somebody who said, if you fly to my city, I'll get you in one. So I flew to her, she could have been the murderer. She picked me up at the airport. She was actually great. And the next day, she gave me a list. She said, take off your necklace. Somebody last week got in there with a lanyard, and they tried to strangle her. No pens, no cell phones, no lettering on your clothes, dark clothes. don't show fear, but don't make prolonged eye contact. I had this whole list, and then I had to go into a room that was like a trap, one door won't open without the other being locked, and then went into the facility where I was surrounded by big male nurses. Most big male nurses work in a facility like that, and came out half an hour later, and it was like a different atmosphere, and came out and just started writing like that night.
I do a lot of Google research. She always is off on an adventure. I'm just always like, and so I'm just sitting in front of a computer screen. What am I working on?
You're here to sell your
Yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm just finishing up the book that will come out in May of next year. It doesn't have a title yet, and it hasn't gone through my editor, so it might look very different in a couple months. So it's not really much to talk about on that front, but otherwise, my exciting news is Parents' Weekend has been picked up for film and television, so we're finalizing that deal, so that's fun.
That's great.
Yeah, so that's just like my kids, the only thing that impresses people. Yeah, so I'm dealing with that and just wrapping up my tour, and yeah.
I think Parents' Weekend, like I told you when you told me that title, and that is so optionable, because the thing in Hollywood is they want titles that tell you exactly what it is. That title's perfect. You know what that is. Like, we've all been there ourselves or had kids there, and the book is great. It's really, I mean, I know you almost had a heart attack while you were writing it, because he has this other little job being a, big-time lawyer. I don't know how he does all of that. I'm the one who sits around in my pajamas while you're off at the Supreme Court. But yeah, it's really good, and I think it's super viewable. Is that the right word? Viewable. It's going to translate very well onto. I'm better with my fingers and my mouth when I'm typing. It's going to translate very well onto the screen.
My wife hates that question, how do you do it? She's like, you have no friends or hobbies. What else are you going to do?
Let's take some questions from our audience. I'm sure there's a lot for both Alex and Sarah. So we have right here in the front row.
Well, for Alex, I just want to...
Well, is there a mic? Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a mic?
Yes, we do.
Okay. 1 second. So we get the...
You gotta turn it on.
Oh, no, over here, right here.
Question.
Yeah.
There we go.
Alex, I was just wondering, if you're ready or
It's not on.
I'll repeat the question. Go ahead.
Okay.
When you're writing your book, you're taking a walk, right? And you never walk in.
Yeah. The question is, as I'm writing my book, as I walk on the phone, have I ever walked into anyone? I have not walked into anyone, but my wife really, sometimes I'll look up and I'm like, where am I? What? I walked miles on Connecticut Avenue. I've missed trains. I've had to have when my children were younger, the time I remember was I wasn't walking around, I was on the bus heading to Chevy Chase, and it was late, like 8 or 9. I was coming home late from work, and I looked up and I realized, I have no idea where I am, and this was before you could just get an Uber. And so I had to have my wife come in the winter, pack all the kids up in the car, and come find me, basically. And I swear if she wouldn't have had the kids, she would have just kept driving. She would have been like, no, this is it. So, but no, so I haven't seriously injured myself yet.
Okay. Up back here.
Yeah, I got a ton of questions, but I'll go with one. I'll start with point of view. I'm in a couple of book groups, and that's a big argument between us. Some think point of view sucks, some think point of view is great. I just like to ask authors who use it. I know, Alex, you do. Why?
Yeah, multiple point of view. I think for me, having multiple different characters tell the story in parallel and then have it all come together. That's just kind of the type of books I like to read. Also, to Sarah's point, attention spans are getting less and less. We have the phones, and I think jumping around to different characters helps the reader kind of stay engaged and not bored. And what I find is the challenge really is just making it all, one, not making it too confusing. And I've been accused in my books of having too many characters. But two, having it all just seem natural the way it comes together. But I think, you know, for you, if you're writing, you just gotta write what you like, and don't worry about, everybody's different. Everybody approaches this thing differently, and that's kind of the magic of the whole thing. Because Sarah writes, you know, books very different than mine that are great, but we have very different styles. So it's everyone brings their own kind of thing to it.
And I think too, with multiple points of view, which I've done before in books, you get the benefit of leaving your characters in a really interesting place and picking up at another, you know, and seeing their perspective, what they tell each other versus what they do and what they know. So it does give you a lot of ground for interesting techniques.
Here. Oh, right over here. Where am I going? There we go.
Thank you. You both mentioned getting an agent as the first step in your publication journey. What was your process for that?
Oh, brother. Well, I went to the Barnes & Noble in Bethesda that used to be there, and I started looking through books that were similar to mine in genre, and I figured if they like their agent, they're going to thank their agent in the acknowledgments. So I started getting a list of agents. I went home and Googled them, and here was the shocker. I really thought that it was going to be super hard to get an agent. You had to know the secret handshake, you had an introduction. They are all out there. Like, they have websites, here's how to submit, send your first chapter, here's the email, here's what to do. They're not hiding, they are excited about discovering new talent. So like my very first manuscript, I queried John Grisham's agent. You know, he asked for a couple chapters, and he's like, yeah, not for me. But I was like, oh my God, I got an email rejection from John Grisham's agent. So you can find them. Just look for the authors, or you could just Google, like, you know, name an author, Google that person and agent, and see what pops up, literary agent.
Yeah, there's a lot more resources now. They're more sophisticated than back when we were kind of flipping through the print books of how to get an agent. But yeah, my funny thing with this, I did what Sarah did. I looked at the acknowledgments page and I pitched agents. I've had a couple. My current agent, who I love, I've had for 10 years now. But when I was moving out, and I was cleaning out an old file of all my rejection letters from agents, I found one from my current agent, so I brought it to her.
That's great. We have another question back here to both.
So my question is, you all talked about how, A, you all have quite a number of books behind you. B, you tend to have to refresh your memory on some of those. But I want to know, do either or both of you have a character that has stayed with you throughout your process and who we might actually get to see again?
I mean, I do, most of my books and will have, like, sometimes a very small character will become a very big character because they stayed with me. I wrote a book called What Have We Done? And there was this kind of quirky crime figure who was in probably 2 pages of the scene, but I liked his character because he was kind of offbeat. And so when I was writing If Something Happens to Me, my book from last year, he's one of the main point of view characters. So I don't write series, but all of my books I think have had Sarah Keller, the FBI agent's been in 3 of them. So for me, it's like if somebody entertained me enough and I think I can write them again, I'll bring them back. But I don't know that I'll ever do a series.
Yeah, the only time I've written continuing characters, I did 3 short stories for Simon & Schuster that are online. They're just, and so one's told it's a young woman who goes home for the holidays. Her mom has passed away years earlier, and she and her boyfriend, whose mom was like a second mom to her, have broken up. They're like 28. He wanted to get married, she didn't. So she's kind of like dealing with that relationship with his mom. Then in the second short story, it's the boyfriend's new fiance coming to town, and the third one is the fiance's sister. So they're all crossing over, but I've never done that in books. But never say never. Yeah.
Right there.
For the multiple point of views, how do you guys keep the characters like different? You know, like what is your process of making sure that the tone and the voice is distinguishable from the others?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think as you're writing it, you try and get to know these people, and and if you start to feel like two characters are too similar, then it makes you just kind of think, okay, well, what would be an interesting? Or you're always just kind of trying to find what's interesting, even if they're a bland character in a way. Is there something interesting in their blandness? And so there's a lot of ways to do it. Like before I turn in my manuscripts, there's an app called Speechify, and they have AI voices. I have it basically read back to me. I use Gwyneth Paltrow's voice. If you're ever using this, it's pretty good. You can get Snoop Dogg's voice too. A lot of them have licenses, but it's a good because I've read it so many times. I don't have the best perspective on any of it, but something about listening to it helps me kind of tweak those type of things.
And yeah, I mean, I'm going to try that Gwyneth Paltrow thing. I think that you've told me that before, and I've got to do it. But I think too with characters, like as you're writing, you really need to know them well, like you would a friend. Like even something you haven't written about them yet, but if somebody asked you what kind of car does your character drive, you'd be like, oh, she drives this car, or would she wear that outfit? So as you get to know them intimately, they become more three-dimensional, and you're able to give them a more distinctive voice.
Right up here, question.
I want to get back to your pitch to agents. Can you tell me how detailed you got? Did you go deep into the plot when you pitched it or wrote about it? Were there themes you wanted to discuss that you wanted to come out? Please advise me.
So you're going to write a query letter. There's tons online. The query letter is 1 page. At the beginning, you introduce yourself, anything about you that is particularly interesting or informative as to why you wrote the book. A paragraph that is going to read like the most compelling book jacket copy, that if you went into Politics and Prose, read the back of a book, you'd buy that book. And then like a closing, you also maybe want to mention why you chose that agent. I would say less rather than more. You can always give them more. Agents are so busy if they're, and they've usually got somebody going through the slush pile, as it's called. So you just want to grab their attention, make them ask for more. You want to show what you can do in your manuscript. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I had a ton of questions. Alex, I have read pretty much all except the last two, last year's and this year's. Sarah, I only read Golden Couple actually, but I do have the others on my TBR. So I know Alex does this a lot. I guess you probably do this. The what the hell moments in a book. You know what I mean? When you read, it's like you got to put the book down to figure out how do you determine what and where those moments are placed as you go throughout the book.
I like pausing and letting him answer the hard questions.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But I tend to, those moments tend to be surprises to myself when I'm writing. I don't necessarily plan them out. I've had one big twist book, and if something happens to me where there is a twist that I did plan out, but I didn't really know where it would go. It would have been much better if it would have been at the end of the book instead of the middle where it was, but that's just where it landed. But I just think you got to go with your instincts and what, it's your story, and just what would make you want to, just have your jaw dropped at what point in the book. And the more, you don't want to overdo it. You want to, but I'm not a big twist book person. I'm not, oh, they're twins. It's like those. I don't do a lot of that. But I think you should kind of. I'm rambling. Go on. Save me, please.
Yeah, I think you want to keep tension throughout the book. Tension is going to keep you turning pages, and when you have the reveal that makes you realize, oh wow, like that's got to be somewhat earned. You can't just throw it in there. You've got to have little clues in, foreshadowing, whatever it is. So it's hard to say. There's no formula for that. That's the part that, as Alex was saying, is creative and comes from you.
I have another question, and you talked a little bit about adaptations for movies or television. How does that work when you sell the story, the rights? Are you then involved in the production of the film version, or does it go away and you never see it again? Talk a little bit about that.
I mean, all of the above. So Amblin, which is part of DreamWorks, Steven Spielberg's company, bought the rights to The Wife Between Us, which was a book I co-authored. And then a couple of years later, we hadn't really heard anything. They asked us to write the screenplay, which we did. Still hasn't been made. But there are other, friendly microphone. There are other books that, we've had optioned, we've had stars attached, other writers have written scripts for, and then they're like, we want to go in a different direction, or this star is busy. So it's a lot of hoops that you have to go through, but I have been very involved, and I've, been the last to know. But you go ahead.
Yeah, no, Sarah's much more involved than I am. When I give it to Hollywood, I think I just got to let it go, and they hopefully know what they're doing. And I'm not a scriptwriter. I don't make the visual is a lot different than writing a novel. So the main thing I do is if I have multiple offers, I just pick the people I think that I'm going to trust the most, which is hard in Hollywood because when you meet with them, they all act like you're the best writer they've ever met. They're like, oh, the Mr. Finlay, it's so great to meet you. And then by the time you're done talking to them, you realize most of them haven't even read the book, but it's just how it is. So you gotta just use your judgment. And I've been lucky with the partners we've had for all the books.
You haven't been lucky. You're good. You write high concept novels, so there's a reason Hollywood wants them.
But writing a screenplay is different than writing a novel, so you had to learn how to write a screenplay.
We literally Googled, how do you write a screenplay? We had to get special software, write a duet that you can use to write with collaborate. But then it was also taking this book that was so much in the heads of our two characters and translating it into something that was just auditory and visual. So it was a challenge, but it was a fun one.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Alex or Sarah? Oh, yes, we do. One more. Okay.
This is more for Sarah, because I don't think Alex has done this. I'm always intrigued by co-authoring. Like I said, I've read more of your books with Gray. I'm now starting to collect your books. How is that process?
That's a good question.
Just how is that process? Because I know it's different from you doing yours. How is that process?
So I always say that writing is like learning a foreign language, right? You have to translate your thoughts onto the page in written form. Co-writing is like learning a dialect of that language. I had to, instead of doing the translation here and coming out here, I had to add the intermediate step of talking about the idea and then pinning it down on the page. So it was tough at first, like shaking up the process. I'm like, why aren't we just writing? And Greer came to it from an editor's standpoint of view, and she's like, because we talk, that's what we do. And so we both had to kind of blend. It was tons of fun to do it. We did our 4 books together. It was great. And I may team up, with somebody again. Alex and I have talked about teaming up on a project, which I'm sure we'll do someday. But I love doing different things as a writer, whether it's switching up genres. You always want to stretch and try different things.
Thank you so much, Alex and Sarah, and I just can't recommend the books enough, and they will be signing books over at the Pavilion, so go over, buy them, and get them signed. Thank you.
Thank you.